ladies and gentlemen, now hosting the RizzoCast, put your hands together for Steven Risotto!
What's going on, everybody, and welcome. My name is Steven Risotto. I used to cover the Giants for SF Bay, but now I'm currently a producer for 95.7 The Game sports radio station in San Francisco. I'm also the host of RizzoCast, a podcast that features current and former big league players, coaches, fans, media, and others who are regarded as some of the brightest minds around the game of baseball. Today's guest is the fabulous and wonderful Ray Ratto. He probably will not like me using those words to describe him, but Ray Ratto is today's guest. If you know the name, you probably know him as being a legendary sports writer in the Bay Area for so many years, so many decades. He's been doing it for a long time. Formerly a staff writer and columnist for the San Francisco Examiner, the San Francisco Chronicle. He covers hockey, football, basketball, baseball. He's pretty much done it all, and he's currently at the Defector. I didn't even mention the radio work he's done. He's been at KMBR, 95.7 The Game. He's done TV stuff at NBC Sports Bay Area, but like I said, right now he's a staff writer for the Defector. You can check out his sports columns on that site. He does a really good job still. We discussed a plethora of different things, from Buster Posey taking hold of the Giants baseball operations group. We discussed the Giants' plan moving forward after the Willy Adames deal. And we pretty much dive into sports writing in general and just the idea that hot takes are kind of becoming and have become infiltrated the sports world and the sports journalism world and the sports media world. So we discuss everything, all of that. Ray was wonderful with his time. I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. This is episode 176 of RizzoCast. Enjoy it. Let's get started. All right, and we are back on RizzoCast, and we are pleased to be joined by Ray Ratto. Ray is nice enough to take some time and hop on the show. Ray, what's going on? How you doing? Good morning.
I would question your use of the word pleased, but otherwise I'm fine.
I promise I am pleased. It is definitely a pleasure, and I want to start with this because we were trying to set this up, and I'm glad that we were able to set this up. You mentioned that you were scheduled to possibly have jury duty this week, and I've gotten the slip in the mail a few times, but I've never actually had to go into jury duty. So I think I consider myself lucky, but I'm curious to know, because this has been on my mind since you mentioned it. If you were assigned to a case, are you the type of person that would be like all in and committed and, let's learn about the facts, or is just the level of disinterest way too difficult to overcome?
I would simply go right to the death penalty.
Okay.
I don't want to spend a lot of time in a room with strangers.
So it doesn't even matter what the case is, you would go straight to the death penalty.
Yeah, just, burglary, library card fines, whatever. Just give them the hot squat, and that's it.
Does California even have the death penalty?
No, which is why I don't think I'd ever be on a jury.
Okay.
Because I'd also want all the attorneys put to death. And the judge, I don't know. He or she would have to work very hard to avoid it.
Maybe life in prison. Is that like a lesser alternative?
That's expensive.
That is expensive.
I mean, you clock somebody and you dump them in the woods. It's cost efficient.
Yeah, and that just actually got me thinking. Do you think jurors would say that someone is innocent so that they don't have to use their money? They're not aware that their money is going to keeping them in jail. I wonder if that's something that ever comes up.
Listen, I put nothing past anybody. I don't have an answer to that for you. I suspect that maybe I've never actually sat on a jury. I've been interviewed for it, and I had a previous commitment this time, so I was excused. But I don't know how a jury room works, except from 12 Angry Men, and every actor in that movie has been long dead, so I can't really go to them for source material.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it has changed a lot, but I just had to get that out of the way. Something I was wondering, and maybe one day when my time comes, that sounds very dark.
Do your best so you don't don't worry about the knock on the door at 3 a.m.
Yeah, no, that's scary. Then I would have a jury for myself then. Alrighty, let's get into it a little bit. I know that there is of course, a new president of baseball operations in San Francisco. I mean, he's been on the job a few months now, but he's still relatively new considering nothing has really happened except for one thing. But we'll get to that. And I think a lot of people were surprised and maybe saw their eyebrows raised when they heard that it was Buster Posey that was taking over the Giants. Did it stun you the way it stunned me when it was announced that he would be the guy? And how do you think that he'll do in that role?
Uh, I was surprised that it was him specifically, but I thought it would be somebody who would recapture the days when the Giants sold out every game. They had ridden this long wave of, for lack of a better term, a honeymoon, where the place was filled every night, and that lasted an extraordinarily long time for them. And then when it started to fade, they hired Bruce Bochy. Then all of a sudden they win three more World Series. Now it's back on again. And the last few years, they've been dreadfully dull and unappealing. And so I thought it would be somebody from that era. I thought there was even a chance that they might go back to Sabian. But Posey specifically, yeah, I was surprised, but not shocked because I sort of thought the way they'd go is Back to the Future.
Back to a great movie, by the way. And I think that, obviously Buster's a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Fame catcher, and there's nobody that could say a bad word about Buster Posey. And in sports, we know, I think in a lot of ways, you're hired to be eventually fired. And Ray, if this goes south, are Giants fans, and I know, like, I've talked to some columnists on this podcast before, and I talked to Lowell Cohn, and Lowell said, I don't care what the fans think, but I'm going to ask you, are Giants fans logical enough to separate a legacy that has already been cemented, that's him in between the lines playing, and a legacy that might paint him as the bad guy who made all these mistakes and has bad drafts and has bad acquisitions and overpays for guys, in hindsight? Are they able, do you think Giants fans are smart enough and logical enough to separate those two?
No, because no fans are logical and smart enough to separate
Fair
those.
enough.
That's just a universal. It's not specific to Giants fans. Um, when things go bad, you need an enemy. When things go good, you tend to gravitate away from the front office and toward the players themselves. It is the nature of American fandom. So if the Giants are no better under Posey than they were under Farhan, I suspect that they'll turn on him. I don't know if it will be with the same, vehemence because Posey is a favorite son, but they will grouse about it because they've looked at 5 or 6 years of bland, dry, mediocre baseball, and those who care about stuff like that will complain because it is the nature of fandom to do so.
And like he is, people forget this, and I'm listening to some of the national conversation, when Buster took the job, and they're like, oh, he's an outsider, and he's a Giants legend, but he's a part of this ownership group, and I think that is like a deal that's not really made. Maybe it shouldn't be a big deal, but he is part of this ownership group. And it kind of makes everybody happy. It makes the players happy. Geez, Buster's our boss. It makes Bob Melvin happy. He respects Buster. It makes Greg Johnson and Larry Baer happy. He is literally on the board for the owners. And it makes, people in, president of the baseball operations department probably scares them a little bit. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. But do you think that connection to being an owner is going to scare people because of the Giants' kind of history of being a big market team, but maybe not acting like one?
No, the ownership is basically Greg Johnson and his dad, Charlie. Buster Posey could have a piece of the team. He might not have even had to put money in. He might have just been named to the board. So the ownership is not going to, Buster Posey is not going to be viewed as ownership. He'll be viewed as management. And there's a difference between the two. And so because of that, I don't see that the ownership part really matters. Um, he was hired because he harkens back a happier time for both management and fans. But I think the thing that made him most attractive and will make him most attractive to fans now is the fact that he seems, whether this is accurate or not, to be a guy who is partially repudiating, analytics and only analytics as the way to evaluate a baseball team. Because I think that was one of the things that worked against Farhan, is that they thought of him as a baseball nerd. And there are people who even now react to that. I don't think they minded that Farhan worked in Oakland or even that he worked for the Dodgers. I think it bothered them because they viewed him as a soulless technocrat who never worked hard enough to sell his program to customers. He didn't like dealing with the media. He didn't like sort of being the face of the franchise. But when a team is, finishing around 500, the face of the franchise is inevitably the guy making the decisions. When the team's going well, the face of the franchise is the best player. But when the team is not going well, it's either going to be the manager or the general manager. And he functioned as the general manager. So after year after year of being mediocre and drab, he became the focus. And when someone in the front office is the focus, you got trouble. So I think that's really what we're talking about, is that Buster gets an immediate bounce because he's of them, but not part of the previous regime, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Do you think that soulless aspect you're talking about that maybe he was painted as has anything to do with the let's call this guy up from Sacramento because we're facing two lefties this weekend and then he's out on Monday?
No, I think it was just simple roster construction, which was, we'll make a half-hearted run at a really expensive guy, get told no, and then we'll start hiring a bunch of 4A players because they're cheaper and they can play multiple positions and it's just more efficient. And efficiency only works if you're getting wins with it. And they weren't getting wins. So San Francisco, weirdly enough, became kind of an anti-analytics fan base because of that. Not because they hate analytics, because they know that is sort of the coin of the realm now in baseball, but because analytics wasn't working for their team. And Buster has already said, we have to, bring back sort of the, part of the pre-analytics feel of baseball, which really appealed to them because they want something different than what they got. And so now we'll see how different it is because it might not be that different. It might very well be, same old, only with a new hat. So, we're we're in a world where we don't know what Buster Posey is, and we can assume we know, but we don't.
Yeah, still a lot of time to be figured out, and even when they weren't 4A guys that were being brought in, they were guys being brought in on contracts that would see their, that would see them see their way out the next year because there was an opt-out involved, and it just, you had something good, but you didn't have it good for long, and, Carlos Rodon opts out, and Blake Snell's gone, and boom. But someone who does not have an opt-out is Willy Adames. Posey inked the largest deal in franchise history, surpassing his own extension. 7 years, 182 million. I'm assuming there's more to come because I don't think you bring Buster in, watch him sign the best non-Soto position player, and then sit on your thumbs for the rest of the offseason. So I'm assuming there's more. So how do you see this team after, again, multiple mediocre seasons, even probably less than mediocre seasons? How do you see them shaping up for 2025? Because it is a tough bear in that division and in that league in general.
Well, you can't make any assumptions until they get a second deal done. And everybody's pointing to Corbin Burnes as that deal. But if you just get one guy, you haven't really changed the fabric of your team or its philosophy. Adames, is a get, and he's probably a bit of an overpay. But this is a year in which owners are spectacularly overpaying. So it's not out of whack for this baseball economy. but it's the second signing that will determine what the Giants are and how they view building a roster. Because if all you get is Adames, then you've improved one position. Your middle infield is better than it was, but you haven't dramatically changed what the team is or what it can be. If you get the second signing, you can make some assumptions. And I think, and this is the surprising part to me, is that Charlie Johnson, who is, about 130 years old, and does not seem to me to be a guy who wants to spend a lot of money on a baseball team, has finally concluded that having a baseball team that isn't very much fun isn't much of a bounce back for you, especially when you're not seeing more money coming in. And they have an uncertain future in that, one, who knows how much longer the regional network that has paid them very well is going to last, and two, how much longer the radio station that they've had is going to last, because that's $8 million from the radio alone. And I'm not sure what the dollar amount on the local TV deal is, but that's a chunk of change. And if the baseball team is going to be considered sort of in the past tense, as in, well, they used to be fun, but now they're not interesting, and I've already seen the ballpark, so I'm not going. If all of a sudden they start to feel more like the Cleveland Guardians, then either Charlie sells, or Greg starts getting told, okay, cost cutting now. It's a fragile state that they're in that way. And they either have to go all in, which if they get another big signing, they would be, or they have to resign themselves to looking up at the Padres and Dodgers for years to come.
That's really interesting because, like, obviously the radio and the TV deal especially, I think the Giants have, it's very stable from what I've heard, and it's not maybe the luxury deals that obviously New York has with Yes Network. They own it. The Mets, I think SNY. The Cubs just did Marquee. The Dodgers, Sportsnet LA. But it's again still a lot of money, like you said. Do you think any of that, the radio and the TV, do you think that is canceled out by the fact that the A's could be out of the state soon? The Giants will have all of Northern California. And this is a different discussion that we don't have to go too far into, but it's just a thought. The A's might be out of the state soon. And if they're not out of the state, they're in Timbuktu. And you have all of Silicon Valley. You have all of the Bay Area. And you have this new real estate development, Mission Rock, that they're expecting. And granted, like, I mean, who's going to rent office space now, especially in, downtown San Francisco? But still, people are living there, I guess. But you have that money coming in. So does that cancel any of that out with the TV and radio?
I don't know, because everything is very much in flux. I mean, the Mission Rock thing is telling, because it's getting built at a time when office space in San Francisco has never been more available. I mean, one of the reasons why radio is struggling is because people don't drive into work or drive home from work anymore. So they can't sell advertising. And the A's leaving helps them a little bit, but I don't know that it helps them enough, because I think if somebody was, advertising with the A's, and all of a sudden the A's are leaving and they don't want to advertise with the A's anymore, that does not automatically mean that they're going to go advertise with the Giants, because the economy is in a more parlous state than it used to be. And so a lot of companies might just say, you know what? We don't really need to advertise with a baseball team. We'll do it some other way, or we'll cut back on our advertising. So it's all very much, it's trying to grab a bubble. You don't know what you're getting. And while we are going to fixate on the baseball team, what happens on the financial side is sort of the ticking time bomb. Greg Johnson was brought in to mind the money. And unfortunately for him, the money is less than it used to be, because the Giants are not a riveting watch anymore. They do not attract attention the way they used to. And I don't think you're going to get many A's fans who are suddenly going to march over to Oracle Park and become Giants fans. I think that's a lost part of the population, and they're not going to get any of that. So, whatever they do to improve their financial standing, they're going to have to do it on their own because the A's aren't going to be able to help them.
Yeah. Does anybody know what is up with Charles Johnson? Like, is he okay? I feel like we haven't heard from him in years.
We never hear from him. I mean, except when he makes a political contribution to some
We hear from his
thing.
documents.
Yeah. Um, no, he's a guy who I don't think he ever planned to own a baseball team, but he's part of the Burns family conglomerate, so it sort of fell to him. Um, I don't think he's ever been much of a public figure, and his son isn't either. And that's, I think, another reason why Buster Posey got hired, because they needed somebody who reminded fans of something baseball related. And Farhan, while he was a baseball lifer, you always thought of him as sort of the office manager because he didn't have a playing or coaching career. He wasn't a scout. He was just Farhan. He was a numbers cruncher, and that diminishes what he did somewhat. But we're talking in broad caricatures here. So I think Posey becomes the face that Charlie won't be, and that Greg doesn't want to be, and that Larry Baer is no longer in a position to be. It's got to be Buster because there's nobody else. And it's interesting that his first hire was another ex-player, Randy Wynn. So the Giants are putting forward the notion that former Giants who love loved the uniform and loved playing in San Francisco are now the heart of the franchise, even though in practical terms the heart of the franchise is still the Johnson family.
Yeah, friend of the show, Bobby Evans is back in the fold as well, so he returns to the organization as well. I'm gonna pivot. Have you seen this golden batter idea that was apparently brought up during some MLB facilitated themed meeting with MLB people? I guess.
Yeah.
And if you have seen it, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was a ridiculous idea for owners because it would mean that all of a sudden, if you get a guy who's being given 750 plate appearances as opposed to 600, and he has a good year, now that's one more guy you have to throw a crap load of money to. And there was no real compelling reason to do it other than, Rob Manfred, mentioned it to somebody. And whatever you think of the rules changes that have happened in the last few years, Rob Manfred is still a powerfully unpopular commissioner, with people who think that commissioners matter. And the fact that he was attached to it, I think, made it even more problematic. I mean, he's just Rob Manfred. I mean, he looks like an Undertaker's assistant. It's clear that he only works for the 30 owners, not for baseball in general. And it didn't move anybody. It seemed to be like a bridge too far for traditionalists and not enough of a compelling argument for people who are casual fans. Because people who are casual fans are going to tend to react more to, is my local team winning now? And do I have to pay attention to them for that? It's not, my God, do I need more Cody Bellinger in my life? And so I think it just, they threw it out there to see what would happen. It laid there like a cod and they moved off of it.
Yeah, whoever, because I did see the comments where Manfred was like, "You don't have to worry about that now," but I do want to know the power that person that leaked it must have felt, because that is an incredible boatload of dirt that you have on. I mean,
Well,
I,
it wasn't a leak. It was Jason Stark writing in The Athletic about it.
did Manfred tell Jason Stark that himself?
He had mentioned it in the past. He didn't, I don't know if he ever told Jason specifically,
Okay, I see.
but Jason trotted it out as, hey, this might happen at some point. He wasn't predicting that it would happen immediately. And he was very careful not to do that because he's good at what he does. But it was something to write during the off times and, of the baseball calendar. And for some reason, it caught a bit of wind. And then Manfred had to say, well, yeah, I'd certainly consider it. And then 2 days later, they stopped considering it because the blowback was considerable in baseball standards.
Yeah, no, everybody
So
went
basically, I
nuts.
mean, it was unlike bringing the pitch clock in because everybody complains that games are too long. And it wasn't like, the courtesy runner in the 10th, which is a stupid idea, but it also shortens games so that they don't go 15 innings. This one had no real constituency going in, and so nobody wanted to champion it. And Rob Manfred, like every other commissioner, is very careful to see where the wind is blowing before he commits fully to anything. And that's where we're at.
We're going to take a break on RizzoCast, but first, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Hey, RizzoCast listeners, how you enjoying the show so far? If you are enjoying the content and want more RizzoCast, please make sure to subscribe and leave a review on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We're also on social media, so follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at RizzoCast. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, and the game story, or the extra inning rule, by the way, is probably the worst possible thing for a game story. When you're sitting in the press box writing a game story, and then you see the guy at second, and then you come up, it's a lethal thing for a game story. And back to the real quick about the golden batter. I understand like offense is important for growing the game, right? It's the shiny toy that baseball likes to put in front of the street window as people walk by. It's money making, it's entertaining. People like the home runs, people like the bat flips. But does MLB like hate good pitching, or is pitching just too good? Because I've always wondered this. Like, they lowered the mound because pitching was too good. They added a DH because they wanted to generate more offense. They banned the shift because they wanted to generate more offense. The pitch clock, I like it, but I think it does hurt the pitcher. The throw over limits, every rule that has ever been introduced has been kind of against pitching. So does MLB just not like good pitching? Do they not think it's marketable, or is pitching just too good?
It's harder to sell good pitching because it only appears every 5 games, whereas hitters are there every day. That was the alleged appeal of the golden batter or whatever their stupid name they're going to give it. But they've always believed that runs sell baseball, not pitching. So to boil down your question, yeah, they hate pitching because pitching is harder to sell. And the telling thing is not that they hate pitching, it's that everything they do to try to make pitching more difficult works against them because, runs are still heading downward. The most damaging thing about the pitcher hitter relationship is when general managers decided that strikeouts don't matter, that contact is not overrated, but it's not the be all and end all. If you strike out, it's just the same as grounding out. And as strikeouts became less damning for hitters, they were willing to swing more at anything in hopes of hitting a home run. And pitchers said, okay, given what we're looking at, and this has been a slow process, it didn't happen in the last couple of years. It's if I just throw harder and harder and harder, then, and they don't mind striking out, well, I'll take that. And so now you have more strikeouts than ever, which means less action than ever. And the thing that's killed baseball is not length of game. It's not even pace of game. It's lack of action. And, deciding that strikeouts are fine works against that in a very fundamental way. And now they don't know how to change it because a generation of hitters has learned that and believes it too. And until they address that, and that's going to take another 20 years, baseball is going to struggle because it is more static a game than it's ever been before. And they've needed outliers like Shohei Ohtani to to make it interesting to the casual fans. Casual fans don't even care that much about Juan Soto's contract. It's just a huge contract that in 2 years will be the second hugest contract. So somebody's going to get more.
Yeah, no, it's incredible the way that has all kind of shifted, and I don't think that there's a rule change that could shift the three true outcomes that you're talking about because it's about the mindset and it's about what the hitter is trying to do, and I don't think
What they're
adding
taught. I
yeah
mean, they're
it's
just literally this is how they grew up playing baseball.
mhm,
So
yeah.
it's, you're locked into a strategy that has not produced the result they wanted, which was more fans, more action, better ratings, more money.
And I saw a video today of a picture of Prince Fielder, and they were showing a group of teenagers a picture of Prince Fielder, and they said, "Who is this?" And none of them could name who Prince Fielder was. And it goes and I played baseball in high school. Shout out to Reardon High School, San Francisco. And I would 4 years ago. I was playing baseball in high school, and I would go to practice every day. And there was only maybe one or two people on my team that I could talk about the previous night's Giants game with. And nobody really knew the RBI leaders or the home run leaders or the ERA leaders. And I realized that people like the people that watch baseball now who are playing, they watch they get their information on how the league is going in 30-second blasts. Like they could watch a home run and a bat flip, but the minute it's a first and third situation with one out, they don't know what they're doing with the baseball. So it's kind of a difficult thing to fathom that, maybe just the players coming into baseball don't watch it, but I guess that's a different discussion its own.
You cannot sell history in an era in which young people don't care about history. I mean, baseball had always been able to go back to the nostalgia well. And something shifted culturally in the last decade to 15 years where, history is what my dad used to pay attention to. You hear more and more about people saying, that's the best player I ever saw. Like all of a sudden, your recollections are some sort of, you know, infallible metric that needs to be followed. It's all about how does this affect me? And Lou Gehrig doesn't affect me. He's been dead since 1939. It just baseball sells its past better, but it's at a time when people aren't interested in the past. So, you're not going to get kids going, oh, that's Prince Fielder. Prince Fielder means nothing to them. When did he stop playing? Like a decade ago?
Something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's ancient history to the generation that you're a part of. It's your fault.
I,
Sing your
I
head in
take
shame.
I take responsibility. I will
Say
put my
you're
head.
sorry to the baby Jesus right now.
I am so sorry, baby Messiah, for letting you down. This is not a good thing. I've not been a good trailblazer for not trailblazer. I've not been a good advocate for the game of baseball.
Well,
Do you
no,
think do you think we should force feed them Ken Burns baseball documentary?
no. They're gonna come to it organically, the way we came to it organically. Nothing assures you of making somebody hate something than working very hard to convince them why they should like it. Baseball has to do this on their own. And while Ohtani is kind of appealing as a notion, who's the second best player in baseball? Is it Soto? Is it Aaron Judge? You know, there's nothing there. I mean, there's nothing there that makes you go, wow, this is different than anything I've ever seen before. I mean, the short attention span, works against sports in general. And the only reason why football is enjoying the renaissance that it's enjoying, at least financially, is that everything is short bursts. Play lasts 6 seconds, and then everybody goes back into a staff meeting and then they come out and they do it again. So in that way, it's meeting the needs of today's consumer. Now, in 10 years, that may be different because rich people tend to oversell their product. And football is overselling like crazy right now. And people might just get sick of it. But for now, football has figured out this is where America is today, and our sport matches that more than any other. I mean, you would think that basketball would do just as well now, but its ratings are down. And maybe that's a function of the people whose attentions get rated are getting older. But, if you're going to sell to a young demographic, baseball hasn't figured out how to do that yet, and they may never.
Yeah, fingers crossed, I guess. And final thing here before we wrap up. There's a lot of people that listen who are really, and one of the things I touch on this podcast, like when I have John Shea on, I talk a little bit about the journalism process, and a lot of people are fascinated by it, and myself included, as someone trying to, break through in the industry. You've been a columnist for like a solid chunk of your career. I want to know what makes a sports column great. What needs to happen to connect the dots, to make a great sports? And maybe there's no such thing as a great sports column. Maybe it's just someone's opinion, and the thought of it being great is totally subjective. But what for you needs to be put together to make a great sports column?
Allow me to depress you. The sports column, as you're thinking of it, is very much in decline because newspapers and places where columns appear very much decline. What you really are asking is what makes a great blogger? Because that's the currency of the realm. What makes a good podcast? And the truth is, the market is flooded with blogs and podcasts. And I think it just becomes a matter of individual taste because there are how many blogs on baseball can you read in the course of a day? Hundreds?
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of, I mean, how many podcasts on baseball are there? I mean, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting three of them. So it really is, you're fighting harder and harder to get a smaller, you know, wedge of the audience. But to more specifically answer your question, you need to be a very clever communicator. You need to have ideas that aren't recycled from 100 other sources. Um, and you need to be thought provoking without being an arm waving idiot. And that might be the hardest thing of all because people don't tend to spend a lot of time thinking the way they used to. They said, my time's too busy. Tell me what you want to tell me in 30 seconds. And the people who succeed right now are the people who have mastered saying something in 30 seconds. I mean, there is a reason, weirdly enough, why Stephen A. Smith is considered the most powerful person in sports television right now. He yells, and he yells in 30-second bites. And that, has reached its market, and good for him. I mean, everybody's got to eat. But that's the nature of the beast now. And when he falls out of fashion, it'll be interesting to see what replaces him because he will fall out of fashion because everybody falls out of fashion. And I don't know even if Stephen A. Smith, sort of appeals to young people, people in the 20 to 35 category because he's been on TV enough that you sort of get tired of him. And I think it's a very open question as to what makes a good column because by the time you apply it, it might be a different thing entirely because the landscape's changing faster than people can create careers out of it. But for you, be smart, be clever, be active, don't be loud, don't be stupid.
I've never figured out the column. I mean, I've done journalism since freshman year of high school. I had a blog even before that. I was talking about what the Giants should do with Santiago Casilla back in the day. But I like because when you go through journalism school, you're taught objectivity, and then it's weird just going through there and like inserting an opinion every now and then, and there's still sourcing that has to happen and still some research that has to be done to confirm what you're talking about. But it's difficult going from you're taught to be objective to, hey, let's see what Steven thinks. Like I don't want to know. I don't want people to know my opinion. But so maybe just columns aren't.
Well, you might
Yeah.
have to get over that.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's fair. And do you think, I mean, you just brought up a good point about what would replace Stephen A. Smith. Do you think, because you're right, we are infiltrated with talking heads on TV, talking heads on social media. Everyone is kind of exhausting their thoughts on everything. Do you think that the art of the sports opinion has been devalued in a way? Do you think we're kind of just, there's no value in it anymore because there's so much quantity?
I think that's part of it. I think part of it is uh, producers of shows all want the same thing because they know that the same thing is at least marginally marketable. There is no reason why Bomani Jones is not the most watched and most powerful person in sports because he's the smartest, he's the most clever, and in many ways, he's the funniest. And he's also the most sort of avuncular about it. He speaks, I think, to multiple generations because he is not inherently thinking as an old person. But he's not because people who make decisions, I mean, look at ESPN. It's all the same kind of person. I mean, Fox, it's all the same kind of person. They all have a template. Everybody cover the Dallas Cowboys because your ancestors covered the Dallas Cowboys. Nobody's basically reaching out and making a huge cultural dent with anything new. And I'm withholding judgment on the WNBA only because it's just started to find a foothold with a sizably measurable audience. And I think, you know, that's why, as annoying as this might be, Caitlin Clark, if she plays her cards right, will not only be able to get people to pay attention to her, but to pay attention to the sport she's in. And already, because of the Time Magazine article, she's getting blowback from people who wanted her to be the new Great White Hope. So, I think everything about sports media is incredibly fluid and not to be trusted 6 months from now because who knows what's going to hit next? I mean, who would have thought 2 years ago that a punter would suddenly become a mover and a shaker at ESPN? I mean, what's the most listened to radio show in America? I mean, is it Levitard? And Levitard is, really almost a side piece in his own organization because he's got like 15 people who do stuff on air. I mean, it's an ensemble. Uh, you know, I wouldn't venture a guess at this point, just because when somebody comes up with something different and somebody's willing to let them run with it, that could turn out to be the next big thing, or it could turn out to die on the vine. I just know that right now, sports opinion is too homogeneous, meaning that everything is about the same. Everybody has the same takes for the same reasons because they all listen to everybody else have the take right before them. There aren't a lot of creative thinkers out there. And that's when things get changed. When somebody with a creative notion gets some room to run.
Do you miss being on the air every day?
Not at all.
Not even a little bit?
Nah, I've done my dance. I mean, to the extent that radio is going to survive, it's time for somebody else to do it, see if they can figure it out. I mean, I would have done, I didn't do enough radio that I think of myself as a radio person.
That's very fair. Yeah.
And I'm working at Defector now because I think of myself as a writer and there's writing opportunities. So, radio was a side gig. And even when it became the main gig, it was still for me a side gig. And I think I would always view it that way. I mean, there were some side gigs that were better than others, but by and large, I am not a radio guy. I'm not a TV guy. I'm a writing guy, which makes me a dinosaur.
And the writing has outlasted all of it. Last thing. I heard from the grapevine that you were once a basketball referee at some point in your life. Is this true?
It is true. I had a ball doing it because
How did that and how did you have a ball and how did that happen?
um, I I'm
This
not even sure how it started. I just sort of, signed up to do some high school games when they were looking for officials, and I just liked it. I mean, it's when done well, it's actually an art form, and I got to basically operate games the way I thought games should be operated, and I was good enough to get to a few games of Division II before, my wife decided to give me a child and made me become an adult. But yeah, it was a ball.
would you go back to it now?
No, I got other stuff. It was a nice thing to do for a while. And truthfully, the notion that everything has to be adjudicated by replay and that common sense is now, you know, no longer encouraged as an officiating skill makes it less fun for me because it makes it less sort of a matter of intellect and feel. It's more let's wait till some technocrat in Secaucus, New Jersey tells me what I saw. That would not be interesting to me.
Is it almost like being an official scorer in a way for like let's say a baseball game, an official scorer? Like is it the same kind of family tree as that?
No, because most of the time the official scoring takes, it follows its own sort of traditions and history.
Yeah.
You don't get to look at a line drive single to right and go, nah, I'd like that to be an error. They have the same sort of rules and structures as everything else. And really, the only time you ever hear about an official scoring decision is when it's ass backwards wrong. And usually there are about 12 other people who will immediately come in and go, nah, you're wrong. Then they'll call downstairs and they'll tell you you're wrong, and then you change it. You know, with officiating, it's you use your best judgment, that's your best call. And if it's wrong, you eat it.
Did you ever eject anyone?
No, I was a guy who could talk my way out of situations.
And
I mean,
calm
I
people?
didn't even
Yeah.
I didn't even tee many people. I figured, you got a complaint, I'll talk to you about it. I'm good enough that I can talk you off the ledge. And it doesn't even speak to whether the call was right or not. But I can bullshit you. I'll confuse you so that I can get away, and then you'll forget that you're mad.
Exactly. No replay, so that helps too. So talking your way talking people off a ledge is definitely a good thing.
I
Well,
mean, that's still something would be a good skill for officials, but league officials don't want officials who do that anymore. They want robots. So they get much worse officiating because robots are fallible.
my favorite is when they still try and argue with the human umpire after the replay center makes a call, and the human umpire has no positioning because he didn't make the call, and he's out there defending an umpire in New York, and it's weird.
Well, yeah, but if you're committed to yelling, you got to finish your yelling. Otherwise you get ulcers.
I
And
like
I
yelling.
and I think umpires know that too now.
Yeah.
I just, hey, New York said that's an out. Take it up with them. I can't take it up with them. They're not here. You are. So it's a human nature deal.
Fun. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed being a referee. That's a fun point in your life, I'm sure. And I hope this was a fun point in your life as well, because I really appreciate you
This
taking
was
the
a
time.
gut-wrenching nightmare, and I'll never do it again.
I'm glad that you were able to take some time out of again your very busy day, and I kept you for way too long. So, um, what is I don't know what the ethics are of asking a writer what's in the works, but anything interesting coming up for the Defector, or anything interesting you've done recently for the Defector?
The Defector, not the Defector. Defector is a great
Defector.
work. It's a great website that has, in 4 years, become a place where, and I don't know how else you measure stuff like this, but you get paid twice a month. You got a 401k, you got medical benefits. Most websites don't have that and lay people off every 6 months, whether they need it or not. We haven't had to lay anybody off in 4 years. And, normal gossip, which you may be familiar with and should be if you're not, has been a great cash cow for us, in addition to being a great, great pod. So we're doing great. I don't know if I'm doing great, but they haven't fired me yet, and that's really my goal.
I thought the Pete Rose piece was amazing. So, and I know you don't like compliments, but I just gave
Well,
one.
then don't give me one.
Yeah, well, too late. Um, yeah, everybody could go ahead and follow Ray. Ray is on Twitter. I think either fortunately or
I'm not
unfortunately.
on Twitter much anymore. I moved to Blue Sky for the same reason that everybody else did.
Okay, so Ray, you could find Ray on Blue Sky. Is it still Indie Ratto?
No, it's Ray Ratto, at Blue Sky. Yeah, I don't even know what the address is. I post on it.
Yeah, just type in Ray Ratto. He posts on it, and
Yeah, you'll find it.
you could find it there. And well, I am on Green Sky actually. And I didn't know where I was going with the rest of that joke, so it didn't really land. Anyhow,
Okay.
yeah,
No, you'll find that no joke lands unless you do stand up. Everything else just passes by.
yeah, that one went terribly wrong.
You're fine.
Yeah, you were my witness. Everybody could go follow the podcast too, Twitter, Instagram, go check it out, and on Yellow Sky, and then of course subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, all that fun stuff. More to come, and see you next time.